I work in HPC systems, and the architecture group is the IDE, and that's a window-based product. Just for background, I have been with the company probably about, I think, coming up on 5 years, and I came in as a computer programmer, as an ECL programmer. So I used the ECL IDE for 13 months as a programmer and became very familiar with it until I was asked to come in, be part of the group and actually take over this. It was originally designed by my boss, Gordon Smith, one of the what we call the four Beatles who came up with the whole HPC systems. And so today I'm going to be talking about the new features that are coming up in 7.0. There's one particular one that's pretty good. But before we do that, I have a question for everybody. Have you used autocomplete and ECL IDE? That's where you go ahead and you type something, you hit a period, and then you're looking for it to complete. For instance, you're in a folder where you have files for your ECL code, the attribute files we call them, and then you type something that's another folder that's outside of that, and there's attributes inside that folder away from that, and you can use that to complete something. So oftentimes, of course, we keep, like any programmers, our code into nice, neat little filing cabinets or folders, and that has been there for a while. And so the question is, have you used that? All right, going forward, this is not going to be a really long talk, but it is important so you know. One of the things I know, if you are an ECL programmer, and an intensive one at that, we have many of those programmers at LexisNexis, of course. Like I said, I was one for 13 months. There are some things that we look at and say, you know, we need to always look at making the user experience a lot better. And one of those would be login, because before version 7, if your password was expiring and you didn't know it, you wouldn't be alerted by the interface itself. So we've looked into that to make that experience a little bit better. But the biggest news is auto completion, and I'll tell you a little bit about that today. Again, this is not going to be a long talk, but for those who use the ECL IDE, it's really important you know these new features that are coming forward. So if you take a look at this, this is really the login screen, and what we have here is what the experience is if you are trying to log in. Now, many people know we have two types of repositories. Repositories being where we keep our code. One of them is the older version, which we still use even in-house, which is a server where the files are on the server itself. And of course, even if and then we also have the files that are on your computer, and which we're rolling out to much more, where we actually check them out of a GitHub. And then, but regardless, no matter what you do, you're going to be logging into a server, most likely. And when you do that, we want to give you more feedback of what's going on. We found, for instance, if you're going to the default and you're not going to be attaching to a server, you're just going to be looking at local files. Yeah, you shouldn't be, you know, no username and password needed, especially people who are beginning to use the ECL IDE. We weren't identifying really clearly for the user, you know, what you should do on a login. If you choose a server that needs a username password, then we need to say, okay, you need to put those in. If you choose like the default, for instance, and you don't, we put that there because we had people sort of confused on those kinds of things. And again, those are the new users, but of course the user experience is really important. And also, even if you are a user quite a bit, you want it to be as bulletproof, because you do it by rote, and if you click on the wrong thing and you go off, you know, the more we can give you feedback to what's happening. So one of the things with the password expiring is that if you, one of the things we don't have at the ECL IDE level is that if we do have when the password is expiring. So we have that information available from the server to our ECL IDE. But we don't have, once that period has passed, let's say, and right now most of it defaults to 10 days, and let's say you're down to 3 days, and then you let it pass, now it's the 12th day. Well, what happens is we're not going to be able to tell you whether or not that's because your password is expired or you had a bad password. So we've added these very small but important signals now from the IDE and its communication with the server, and that's a really important area that we're working on in 7 in general. I'm only talking about the things that are there now, of course, but we are looking to make that, because the ECL IDE is communicating most often with the server, and you're running things on a server, we want to make any type of problems with, maybe there's a communication that you can't get it. We do have a lot of those hooks in, but we're trying to make that user experience a little bit better. Here is what will happen when you're looking at the password expiration and changing. Before, you could always go in, and if you clicked on the I'm not sure, Bob has a name for that round bubble at the top, the circle thing. I'm sure he'll be able to come on and tell me what that was. I heard him give that a name. But in the very upper left hand corner, you can click on it, and at the very bottom, you can change your password. Now, of course, you know, that's nice, but, you know, do I have to change my password? We have to change them so frequently, it gets to be quite annoying. Well, you know, when is that happening? We didn't have that information. The ECL IDE was not asking or alerting the user to when that was happening. So now we, in fact, do that in version 7. So it says your password expires in 6 days. Do you want to change it? And then if you do, then you can change it. You can see the little window that comes up. Now, of course, that window will come up if you hit that round button on to the right, that big little screenshot there. If you go to the bottom and click Change Password, of course, you'll get that same pop-up, which is on the bottom left. But now we actually do query and ask the server, could you tell us, and we do get how many days before expiring that you have. And if it's like 12 days, we won't pop this up. But if it isn't, then we will pop that up. So that makes the user experience a little bit better, because, again, those people who are programming literally make their living using the ECL IDE, which are quite a few. All of these things make their lives a lot simpler, and that maybe their expiration has passed, they didn't know it, they try to log in, it comes back, doesn't even alert them to the fact that, well, that is an option. Maybe it's not that you can't get there, maybe your password has expired, and even before then, helping them out with that. So that's something new in version 7. It seems simple, but if you're an everyday ECL programmer, every thing counts. Believe me, I hear it when things aren't working. People are saying, my job has stopped, help me, we have an issue, and that's one of the things we want to make less and less happen in version 7. But the most exciting part of really the version 7 is something that we're doing which we didn't do before, and that's in the area of auto-completion. Like I said before, we have auto-completion where you type a module name and you hit period, and we'll go and look and say, okay, what are the file names below it, and we'll pop those up. But now we have the ability to take the import statements. What we're basically doing is when you go and do a syntax check on a file, what's happening is we're calling the compiler an exe, an executable application that sits on your computer, on your PC, because this is PC based, and Windows PC, and it will call the compiler. And we weren't before asking for what we call the metadata. Metadata will give us the information about the parsed information in this particular file. So now we're taking advantage of the compiler giving us back information that we've never used before, like imports and record structures. And if you're a programmer, those things are quite nice. So if you have import std as SSS, you don't remember, you know, it's std, you can make anything you want there as a sort of an alias. We have imports, so you can import something. So if you type in meta import, as you see here, is imported, you're going to get those things. Those kinds of things exist, but we are doing that at a much higher level now that we're getting. And I'm going to show you something that is quite new. For instance, you can see here, if I type in the $ and a dot, it knows that the $ is in fact in your current module folder, and those are all the other attribute files there. So that is new in 7. You also see that you have, I can make an alias for it, MMM. I always try to make these for examples easy to remember. MMM, you type that, and of course you see the same thing come up. So those are really great savers. Normally, of course, you use those so you don't have to type so much, because people use what is often called Polish notation. At least I'm an older programmer, where you try to put the name of the attribute file or the module as plain and explained as you can, and they can get awfully long, and those things can be very annoying. And of course, it's nice to have the aliases, and then now they will work with the dots. But yeah, and here is again the import as that I had talked about. Of course, I talk in front of my slides. You can see here there's the standard where you can type in the standard dot or the SSS, the alias, the same kind of thing. But the real big savings, and I think as an ECL programmer, that is going to really make people's lives better. If you are an ECL programmer and making your living at this, one of the things is, as you notice in this ECL attribute, I have 2 records, one called address record and one called person record, and I have fields in them. And when you are, when I was working as an ECL programmer, we were working with data coming in that literally, it's hard to believe, that had 180 columns. And when you have all of these columns, you have to remember what do I need? What is that field name's name? And of course, that didn't exist before version 7, and now we have that. Why do we have that? Well, again, when we go to do a syntax check on this file, we get metadata. The compiler says, hey, these are the things inside that. We keep that internally to the ECL IDE, and when you hit that dot, it will go looking for the record structures and those field names. And to me, that is probably the biggest advancement for the auto-completion, especially for those hardcore programmers. So that's quite exciting. So again, I told you it would be a short talk. We are working on some more things that are dealing with the metadata, and I will be back, if not later this year, next year, but I'd probably sometime later this year to tell you some of the other things that we are going to be doing that are related to the metadata. And we have this quick poll question, which is, have you ever changed your password via the ECL IDE? Again, this would be for people who have not used version 7, where this new ability of alerting the user that your password is about to expire. But did you ever go through and actually go down, click on the little round circle, which Bob will, I'm sure, when he comes back, tell me what he calls that, and go and say, oh, I'm going to change my my password. So that's my question. So that's all I have to talk about. Again, it was short but sweet, but I think this is going to be really great improvements in the usability, and that's what my job is to make this make ECL programmers' job in the ECL IDE, which is really our flagship editor. If you haven't used it before, it does have the most bells and whistles, and Bob knows he's my super user. But we hope if you have any question, you can always send us an email. So that's it, Bob. It's back over to you.
All right, David, thank you so much. Before I get to your questions, you can take a look at the questions from the audience, if you will, and go ahead and prioritize them. We had one last question come in for Vince, and I'm going to go ahead and answer that on his behalf. He said, does Haas work on that free tier? And Vince replied, yes and no. He said, you have to choose an EC2 instance in the free tier and limit your S3 usage. And he said, but you cannot add EBS. He said, hang on a second. Yeah, he said you cannot use EBS 3, and just lost the message there. So you have to limit the instance storage of the node, which is quite limited. All right. All right, so thanks, Vince, for that answer. let's take a look at the poll questions. Our first poll question, which was, let's see, we got the first poll question: do you use autocomplete in the ECL IDE? Yep, kind of expected this one. Only 28% said yes. A whopping 71% said no. All right. So, by the way, what that circle menu that David was referring to is, I like to call it the orb menu, ORB, the orb menu. Now, that actually came from my colleague Richard Taylor, so he gets the credit for that one. So.
Okay, I'll be sure to make sure I use that from now on.
All right, so let's take a look at some of these questions. We'll run through these. We got little extra time here, so we can kind of hit all of them in the order then, if we could. First one, David, will there be a mouse over tooltips on records?
Yes, we are working on it. The metadata that's coming in, we've actually had a couple iterations on this. That is definitely in the plans. It's not yet implemented, but it will be coming out in version 7, which again, the idea is we are using that metadata, but not all of it is being used currently in the ECL IDE. So it would be absolutely nice, especially for those who are, again, pretty hardcore programmers, to put their mouse over and be able to take a look at what's really going on, the tooltips, even F12. So yes, we have things in the pike. They are not all implemented, and yeah, we will definitely have that.
All right, thank you. Next question we have is: does the current auto completion work with the up caret? Good question.
Yeah, the up caret. Yeah, the up caret is a way of saying I want to include, because a lot of people put the modules, which are basically, for just in standard terms, you have modules and you have attributes. Attributes are like the files, the program files, and modules are really folders. When you put in the caret, that allows you to say, hey, I'm in this folder down a few levels. I want to include and import a folder that's up a ways. You can actually use the caret, which is sort of like ... in a directory to get there. Yes, that will be a part of it, but right now in the versions that you can download, no, it's not available just quite yet, but that'll be coming out soon.
All right, fantastic. Next one: does auto-completion to field names in modules properly handle exported versus non-exported attributes or definitions?
Well, the way we work on, and I'm not sure I'll be able to answer this, but maybe this will be an answer to it, is that when we get all the meta information back from the ECL CC, the compiler, there's a little exec file that is in. When you install the ECL IDE, when we do a syntax check, we literally have this little program that runs, and it will give us back the meta information. Now, the way I'll answer that question is that if that meta information is for those exported and non-exported is in that meta information, then we'll of course be able to use that. There is of course the possibility that now that we are using the metadata, that we'll ask the people who are on the team that writes the compiler to say, hey, could you also include this information? So I don't know the answer to that, but I will say if it is included in this metadata, which we haven't used all of it, we should be able to handle the exported versus non-exported.
Okay, thank you. And last question, I think I even know the answer to this one. It says, which release of 7.0 has the auto-completion working? And I'm currently using the 7.0.6. And also, David, you want to mention that option in the compiler preferences, the metadata checkbox?
Yeah, the reason I didn't mention is because that will actually going away. It's a little bit of a story there, but basically we have it so you can turn that on and off. Well, one of the things we didn't anticipate was that some of the users of the ECL IDE literally had 27,000 attribute files in one module. And because of that huge number, we were going to load everything about everything we could, and have that available. And most of the time that worked fine, except for some of these people, these users who had immense amounts of attribute files in a module. So right now, the current version, you'll be able to have that. It's not turned on, but if you go to the compiler tab in your preferences, there's a metadata checkbox. If you click on that, it will be working for you. But we are now going from, instead of a top-down, do them all, take what we have for and do more of what we call bottom-up, and that's the next version's coming out. So yes, it is available, but that checkbox will actually go away. The most important thing for us to remember, of course, is that, especially if you're listening this into a recording mode, that it is available there, and in the future you won't even have to do that, because we're only, if you open up a file and the files you are working at, we will be processing those. We won't just go and process all of those. But yes, if you download it today, go to the preferences, check on that box called metadata. That will then get you the ability to do the completions even on the record structures.
Okay, thanks, David. And so
okay.
before I let you go, we have one last poll question. I just wanted to go review the results of that one. And maybe this was kind of obvious. Have you ever changed your password via the ECL IDE? And again, 73% said no. So possibly with these new features that are, coming in place, that will definitely change as they download the latest version of the ECL IDE.
Yeah, I think
right.
so. In fact, that's why one of the reasons we put that in there. So thank you very much, everybody, for allowing me to present.
Yeah, thanks, David. We're looking forward to that. I mean, the auto completion is fantastic, and we'll even add to even more features of the ECL IDE that we already are accustomed to. So thank you again.